Dr. Charles Darren, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Cool. Thanks, Melissa, and thanks, Charles, for being here. I'll kick us off. We've got 30 minutes. I wanted to share three stats with you that I just found honestly kind of fascinating. But the first one is from Global Insight Global that says 63% of recruiters in 2025 used AI tools specifically to automate repetitive tasks. It's a pretty high number for 2025. So 63%. The next number is 43% is the rate of AI adoption for just HR tasks overall, which is up significantly from 26% in 24. So 43% is the rate of AI adoption with HR tasks up from 25. And then the last number I'll share with you is 88% of global companies, which is a lot. Oh, my good friend Doug Albert, that's a lot, right? A lot of global companies are using AI in HR functions, including recruiting. So it's out there. There's a lot of experimentation going on. I don't know that the level of sophistication is where everyone thought it might be at this point. But what we're going to talk about today is maybe some infrastructure gaps, some regulatory confusion, and quite honestly, we're kind of a low hiring environment that we're in today, and some really unclear ROI, and really kind of focus on some real use cases that will hopefully give you guys some realistic expectations and some practical next steps on what some of the things that are happening today. So really based on the insights that I've kind of seen and I say I'll flip it over to Dr. Charles, but there's a couple of things that I'm seeing is resume screening, right? The most common AI use case today really is around looking at matching and finding resumes. And I say resume screening and sourcing and kind of like looking through and screening those resumes. I'm not talking about screening out or anything like that today because it's still pretty rare to have a lot of those actually screened out. But we are seeing a lot of resume databases that are being used through AI that help generate a slate of candidates overall. And it is being, the change and the pace with which that is becoming better is actually incredible. It is on a monthly basis getting better overall. And so I think we're going to continue to see some skill and experience matching that just gets better and better and gets more in tune to, less sophisticated prompts and less sophisticated search criteria that are going to help recruiters automate a lot of the battle of that existing battle we always have in trying to find the right candidate, the right resume. Charles, what are you seeing around assessments and maybe interview scoring?
Yeah, so I'm always focused heavily on a little bit later parts of the process, and we're seeing there's a lot of excitement and a lot of talk of potential around automating scoring, particularly around video-based interviews. Many of you might be familiar with what's called the asynchronous video interview, in which the candidate records a response to a series of prompts, and they can have, the opportunity to retake it different amounts of time. Those are great because they certainly allow a candidate to have a voice and express themselves in the terms that they feel are best for them. However, they're really challenging to score, particularly at volume. And so AI has been something that really many people have talked about as potential, and people have used it for some time. So certainly we're seeing some of that. There definitely is some scoring around automated assessments, whether it's scoring candidates on information we're extracting from the resumes, whether it's screening or minimum qualifications questions or actual assessments themselves. Definitely a lot of interest and a lot of activity there. Probably a little bit riskier in terms of regulatory environment than some of the other things we're doing, but definitely a lot of excitement around how do we automate and speed up the hiring processes. Almost every talent assessment vendor in the space is aiming at integrating these tools into their offerings.
Yeah, no doubt. We're seeing just a lot of efficiency from an administrative standpoint. So whether it's chatbots or scheduling tools, workflow automation to reduce the recruiter touch points, and trying to really enable higher value interactions from what the recruiters have done in the past. So really giving them the ability to kind of dig into someone's experience and someone's background and someone's preferences, and kind of begin to really match that up to the culture of an organization. So that efficiency that we're seeing overall from administrative standpoint is beginning to show some ROI, and it is beginning to have recruiters feel like they've got a little bit little bit of breathing room, a little bit of bandwidth overall to make better decisions as they go along. But there's still some challenges that are out there, and I think that you got to understand that today AI is not plug and play. I mean, there is not a sophisticated enough model today, I don't think, where anybody can go, you know what, we're going to plug this in, we're good to go, and just kind of let it run, right? It still takes, I think one of our clients used this analogy the other day. We're in a perpetual beta. I kind of love that term because if the organization is in the mindset of perpetual beta, then everyone is going to kind of understand what the expectations need to be around, implementing AI to really help navigate. We're seeing even some big brands struggle, with successful high volume hiring using AI only, right? There's some basic candidate questions that really aren't consistently answered. And AI is not really fully ready to do that yet. There's a lot of integration that has to occur and a lot of connectivity that has to occur within multiple systems for the plug and play AI to really be ready. Now, not that we're not on the path to that. We're absolutely on a path to that overall, but we're just not quite there from an organizational, standpoint yet. I think when you think of it, that organizational infrastructure, it's just not quite ready yet. And when you think about the challenges there, there's a lot of internal data and decision frameworks that have to be prepared and cleaned up and ready. And Charles, you know way more about decisional frameworks than I do.
Yeah, and certainly, the expectations of what AI can do, which is incredible in some ways, oftentimes outstrip the reality in that we expect it to be perfect. Human beings aren't perfect. And so, certainly there are challenges around that. And from a decision point, oftentimes there's a rush to implement the technology without really thinking through how humans are going to use the technology. And certainly one thing we are seeing from a broader candidate reaction and regulatory framework is a human being has to be in the loop. And so as we're thinking about those implementation challenges, we really have to think about how humans will use these tools to make decisions or support the decisions they need to make or oversee the decisions. Um, Certainly, those are something that probably have received a lot less attention, that the technology and the integration and the wow factor has certainly led as opposed to the usability factor.
When you think about those things, is there, regulatory uncertainty that's creating issues there as well?
I mean, certainly we would use the technical term that it's a mess. That there won't be any federal regulatory framework in the immediate future, but certainly at the federal level, there's a lot of activity talking about it. 2 weeks ago, the House Education and Workforce Committees, one of the subcommittees of that committee held some hearings in which they offered a variety of perspectives from different witnesses on the impacts of AI in the workplace and on the workforce and education. And so certainly there's a lot of talk and thinking, but not much action. At the state and local level, there is a whole host of action. The Conference of Governors and state legislatures reported that in 2025, 38 states implemented over 100 different measures only at the state level, let alone the local measures. So there's a lot of activity, which just creates confusion and difficulty, particularly for large organizations operating in multiple states, since the rules do vary pretty widely between states and municipalities, and it's really difficult to integrate AI at that local level for the large companies. We want something that really can cut across. So certainly there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of changes. The good thing is if you follow what we've had in place in terms of, good talent acquisition practices for the last 50 years, those will pretty much keep you out of trouble. But certainly as we start implementing the new technology, we really do need to think about some of the unique challenges. And we're starting to see some litigation emerge. The Eightfold case, Mobley case, both in California, certainly is opening people's eyes to we don't always understand what AI is doing, and that can create a lot of risk of not understanding and not knowing. But it's definitely an area to stay tuned. And as Melissa said, we'll send out some resources about things that are coming out. But almost, with 38 states, the majority of states in the country are implementing some form of regulation around the use of AI as it relates to a wide sphere of our lives.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of a fine line, you're going to try to navigate, right, as you kind of go through that. So how can you, or what's the best way you think to communicate AI usage, with organizations to help them be transparent, number one, but help keep themselves out of trouble, number two.
Yeah, and AI, it certainly brings some conundrums to organizations in that, as you said, Darren, that AI's got a lot of benefits from efficiency, makes things happen faster. And if we think about one of candidates' biggest complaints in hiring processes, it's how long it takes to get an answer. And when you're looking for a job or looking to make a job change, time is something that's important to you. So certainly this can happen a lot faster. But the research to date is pretty clear that people are generally fairly negative about the use of AI in hiring processes as when it starts to affect them. And what's really curious is, there's been a variety of studies of applicants' reactions to different ways of assessing talent in an acquisition process, and even things that are generally favorable, like interviews. The reactions do become quite negative once we acknowledge that AI is being used in some way in that process. And so it's not a question of, making candidates happy about it, but it's how do you mitigate the downside? And, certainly giving people no information can create anxiety and negative reactions, but also giving them all of the every nitty-gritty detail also might create some of that. So there is some double-edged swords, but some level of transparency I think is coming, and a lot of the employment-oriented regulations and local laws that are coming into place really do focus on having transparency, but there's not a lot of guidance about what that transparency should look like. Um, I think with a lot of things, particularly following models coming out of Europe, putting things in plain language for people is probably your best bet. Here's what we're doing. We're using AI to identify resumes that have the experiences we're looking for, like something that everybody can understand. I think that would be some of the guidance, but also, ensuring that a human being is in the loop. I mean, that's one of the key things we're seeing in the litigation regulation front is that if you hand everything over to the machine and the machine gives you the slate and makes the recommendations of who to hire, that's probably not a good recipe for you.
Yeah, we also just think that having that human subject matter expert that understands the job, understands the candidate, and understands the company nuances around the culture, around the work environment, that contextual awareness really kind of does bring discernment into that decision. And those are capabilities that AI really can't replicate yet.
Yeah.
So you just can't really decide, and you still need real human judgment to kind of refine and validate, some of those outputs. And it's just really kind of critical to think about that. And I wanted just to share, a couple of real world, scenarios that we've seen, with our clients and where it kind of works and where it doesn't work. And so, um, no names here to protect the innocent, but there's, software out there that really does help a lot with scheduling, let's say, and pre-screening to a large degree. And where we do kind of see it work well is that the candidate gets notified, pretty quickly that there's a spot that's open for them to interview, even if it's after hours. And that works great. So the system is still working 24/7. And this really does help us fill up this hiring manager interview slate outside of normal working hours. So that piece of the scheduling AI, because it works with both the calendars and everything works really well. It also helps when we're kind of trying to push out, some employee value proposition and being an employer of choice and helping communicate that really does enhance the candidate's experience. And so they're getting, information kind of on their timeline at their right time when they can take a look at it. They can apply 24 hours a day. And the AI is generally can answer those general questions, pretty well, keeping conversations relevant, with the candidate and the solution. Actually, we've seen that kind of work pretty well. So it's a great experience for candidates, providing them several reminders as well, their upcoming interview times and things like that. So the scheduling piece, the reminder piece, the off-hour communication piece really is kind of working well, and it really does that right there takes a lot of administrative work off the recruiter. That's allowing this automation to really help out, kind of along the way. And so, and it does also provide kind of for a more consistent process across the organization. So you don't have multiple recruiters doing it kind of their own way, right? And so, oh, I like to do it this time, I like to do it that time. It does provide kind of for a consistent process. And those of you that know me, I love a consistent process execution, and it just helps data be more accurate and help us understand the nuances around that. But at the same time, we've just had that, that same system, that same process that we use with this customer is that when a candidate might request a reschedule, many times it provides them today with a generic message. We're unable to schedule at this time. Let us know if you'd like to cancel. Like, oh, wait, I don't want to cancel. I just need to reschedule. So instead of being provided with alternative times, so let's say those times are already all filled up, right? So all of a sudden now you've got a bottleneck, right? And where the system itself can't go, oh, wait, it would be better if the system, and this will be input we're giving to that system as well, that, hey, let the recruiter know that this candidate needs to cancel and reschedule. There's no open spaces. And it still takes a little bit of, thought there around nuances of, hey, how can I get back into another time? I can open up more times, with those hiring managers that may be full already. And as you're pulling out of that time slot. So it does, create some logistical challenges there around rescheduling, um, and getting that candidate at the right time, the right place. And it's kind of difficult to move them today in an automated way, to another step. So I think those things are going to be cleared up here pretty quickly. But today we do see that kind of is a struggle, overall. We've got another client that is piloting some fraud detection as well. And when you think about kind of what that looks like, from a candidate standpoint too, we're seeing tons of candidates of duplicate, resumes that are out there, or believe it or not, even trying to apply to multiple jobs. And so, which is fine, right? When they try to apply to multiple jobs, but using someone else's resume to apply to multiple jobs, that's the problem. And for years, even inside our own recruiting machine technology, when we've done references, we've had a way to check IP addresses to make sure that you've told me this is a person doing your reference, but it comes back to your same IP address. Well, that's not even AI. That's just a good way to kind of check for fraud along the way. But now we've got, the ability within some fraud detection agents that are working within some of these systems that are out there that are looking for things that will be really interesting to see how it turns out. Inconsistencies in tone and voice during the interview, behavioral anomalies. Again, I said different candidates applying with the same resume or same email addresses, and the one person did the screen, but the other person shows up to the interview. And that's happened. It happens for as long as I can remember, right? That we have actually seen that happen. But now AI is beginning to be in a place where they can begin to detect some of this and be able to stand up and say, hey, here's a red flag. Here's some of the things that's going to happen, and be aware that there could be some fraud here. So it really is helping us kind of prepare for, what's going on. And as we go into kind of what's next, I think that this agentic AI, right, this agent that's going to help you is definitely going to be, the way that we're going to see some additional efficiencies along the way. But when you think of real world examples, man, scheduling is getting to a place where it's almost there. Fraud detection is getting to a place where it's going to be closer, and is a big need right now with, candidates using their own AI to create the perfect resume against maybe an imperfect experience, right? And things like that. But I think there's going to be some need for preparing for this agentic AI coming up in the next 6 months. Is that kind of what you're thinking, or do you feel like it's further out than that?
It's like anything where it'll ebb and flow and stop and start. And so certainly there's a reactive nature to some of this where there might be a large lawsuit and everything seems to come to a halt. But I think certainly the efficiency point is a really safe bet for organizations, and a couple great uses in the chat would be, some of the tasks that take recruiters time of not just interacting with the candidates, but getting job postings ready, ensuring that you have current and accurate job information and job descriptions with clear requirements for what the job needs, ensuring that it complies with all laws related to the use of technology. So I think not only the interactions with the candidate will become more efficient, but some of the basic things. I mean, there's some really exciting work Right now, helping with job descriptions and analyzing work to determine worker requirements and job requirements. Those are, I think, really safe ways of using AI and that are pretty close. Probably where it's a little bit longer time frame is more on the assessment side and making, using passive data to assess candidates' capabilities, taking an interview, transcribing what they said into a transcript and having that score, that's been around for a decade. Um, Other things where we're trying to, analyze tone, micro expressions on the face, certainly those things are a little further out. But the fraud detection, I agree, is a really interesting one because AI, not only in the accuracy of information in the resume, but in terms of the authenticity of what's being said, that we know there's all sorts of tricks that people will do to try to beat the resume screeners right now, like embed commands in the header, footer, or in images, or things like that, that we're now trying to catch. But also there's essentially tools that will essentially listen in during an interview to the question that's asked and will create a script for you, much like a teleprompter. So as much as it's working to help battle fraud, it's helping create fraud as well. So I think those are areas where organizations are really focused over the next 6 months because we want authentic candidates. I mean, it's the worst thing is to bring somebody on board and find out they really don't have the capabilities that are needed to succeed. It kind of puts the candidate and the organization in a difficult spot.
Yeah. Kind of an off-topic question, but one that I was just thinking of as you were speaking. You think about the uses of AI and selection overall. We didn't talk
Mhm.
about this earlier. Someone put you on the spot, so I apologize in advance for that. I know you love it when I do that, but do you have an opinion on when you think you look at AI and is it high volume recruiting where the real benefit is taking out some of the churn, some of the fraud, some of the redundant tasks? Or is it more in senior and executive level recruiting where you really need to have this in-depth understanding of a candidate and cultural fit and things like that? Do you see a balance one way or the other on any of those?
Yeah, actually, I see it at both ends, but in different ways. So, for example, for high volume recruiting, historically, interviews have been out of the question at high volumes because you just don't have enough time in the day and it's too expensive. But yet, interviews are a way of assessing candidates that can generally be seen very positively by candidates, yield very relevant information about the likelihood of the candidate performing the job well, and they're generally fair. So AI opens up the possibility of using more of those. But on the executive side, we generally are doing deep dives into executives and we're relying on human beings to try to integrate lots of different information about the executive level candidate to try to come up with a sense of they're the right person for the organization. AI can be very helpful at taking lots of different information and integrating it from interviews you've done with the candidate and former people they work with to assessment data that we might have done to their resume to all sorts of accomplishments and things they've done at the work. So AI can be really useful to help you integrate that in a more consistent fashion than what maybe human beings can do, and it takes a little bit out of some of the aspects of human decision making that don't work as well, to free us up to focus on the things where we really do a good job.
Yeah. Early in my career, one of the worst hires I made because I was just learning to play golf and I interviewed a sales guy and he loved to play golf. Man, we clicked. We clicked in the first interview. I hired him immediately because I liked him a lot. He played golf. I liked him. I wanted to learn how to play golf. Absolute worst sales hire I ever made in my entire career because what did he do most of the time? He wasn't selling, he was playing golf.
Golf. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
And
like
so,
the idea of being able to kind of get the data together, say, hey, here's an objective view of all the data you've gathered to make really good decisions. And
yeah,
we,
certainly that consistency piece is a real advantage of AI, but obviously it's only as good as the data that underlies it. So certainly, you need to have generated some data to help AI run and ensure that that data is job related and accurate as well as, fair.
you know, well, I know we're coming up on time, so I just want to kind of do a couple of takeaways real quick, and then maybe we can look at some questions that are there. But I just want to say that I think AI is powerful, but it's not a magic wand, right? And so everyone needs to think about their organizational culture, what their leadership is framing up as their approach to AI, both from a business standpoint, from an HR standpoint, and a recruiting standpoint, and find that area around candidate experience and governance that you can really make an impact, and just use human judgment in the right places still. But you can't toss out human judgment because you're using AI. You'll use it to augment, human judgment. And I think the companies that are going to win are to combine that automation, transparency, and that people-centric approach to, hey, this human is still going to make this decision overall because I got to work with you every day, right? I want to make the right decision because we're going to be together as we go down the road. And then when it comes to communication, that full transparency could increase negative reactions, kind of to your point you were making, but zero transparency does too. So you got to find that sweet spot where clarity reduces friction without overwhelming candidates with the technical details behind what's happening. And you've got multiple generations still in the workforce. You have from the boomers to the Zers, and you got some Ayers coming in, right? You've got a lot of different levels of sophistication and knowledge about AI. So try to find that sweet spot where I think the word that you use is clarity reduces friction, and that's where you want to go. And so with that, I kind of turn back over to Melissa and go, do we have some questions that we want to try to jump to in the
Sure.
3 we have left?
Yeah. I think the first one from Joanne is the AI vendor landscape in talent acquisition, feels increasingly saturated. Is it still too early to clearly identify the long-term category leaders?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. And I'd say there's really two groups in the space. They're your traditional talent acquisition providers who have all sorts of kind of tried and true tools that they use, and they're upgrading them to take advantage of AI and other technology. And then there are those that are really coming out of the box and creating something new. I think that the tried and true tools will continue to be tried and true. Some of the really exciting things that we're going to, take all sorts of information on your LinkedIn post or other passive information about you to assign some score about your leadership capability or things like that. That's a little more dicey, and it's hard to say if that will, emerge as a set of tools that's reliable and robust and who would lead on that. But I think, the people that lead right now on the assessment space in particular will continue to lead just with enhanced tools.
Yeah.
Great. We do have a few more, and for those of you who have put some questions in and we don't get to them, we will send you a actual response. I'll connect with Darren and Charles, but I think we've got time for one more. Are the regulations and laws you're seeing mostly related to macro or micro usage of AI? And have you heard about issues around recruiters using AI for simple tasks, message writing, creating job descriptions, etc.?
Yeah, the regulations right now are really around more macro tasks and anything that involves a decision that's being made about an individual. Um, and whether the processes that were used to make that decision can be demonstrated to be job related. I mean, those are kind of the big things where we see the regulation. There's really no regulation against leveraging AI to create messages or write better job descriptions or analyze job data to create a job description. More of the issues we see there is the carelessness. So people are not checking the output. People are not really reviewing what the output is with a critical eye. So I would say those are the more micro issues are the ones that are the embarrassing ones. The more macro issues are if you follow the tried and true kind of rules of the road, you should be reasonably okay.
Great. Well, with that in mind of time, it's 1:30. Again, I'll just remind those who did ask questions that we didn't get to, we will send you an individual response. I want to thank Dr. Charles Scherbaum and Darren Finley for joining us today on the ever evolving and ever interesting topic of AI and recruiting. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Charles.